morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Cheng Lee, the host for the sessions of the World Knowledge Forum 2022. We'll now begin the session, Secrets of Digital Humans and Metaverse. The moderator for this session is Kim Yoon, partner of Sean Ventures. So please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Yoon and I'm with Sean Ventures, a Korean venture capital firm that invests in AI and metaverse technologies. And it's an honor and pleasure for me to host this session along with very distinguished and experienced speakers. I will make a short introduction for each of the speakers and then they will probably also introduce themselves during a short presentation, after which we'll have Q&A. To my left, or to your right, we have Mark Sagar, the CSO of Soul Machines, a digital humans company. And then next, we have Asaf Ashkenazi, who is the CEO of Eversight. It's a company that builds extremely cool gadgets for the metaverse. And I think we'll have a little sneak peek at his products that are upcoming. And last but certainly not least, we have Professor Enrique Danz of IE Business School in Spain, who will talk about the metaverse as a whole, including the network infrastructure, the policies, legal and social aspects, as well as the actual experience itself. So what we'll do is we'll have each of the speakers give a 10-minute presentation, followed by a Q&A session, where we'll actually field and take questions from the audience. So Mark? Okay.
So I'll just go straight into it. Yeah. Okay, so the metaverse will have, well, to start with, it doesn't really exist yet. It's still got a long way to go and lots of pieces to come together. But when it does come together, one of the components of it will be digital people. So you'll have real people interacting with each other through avatars, but you'll also have all the things which need to be autonomous. And these are things, so this is so that people can interact with other people when they're not there. Or you can have companies reach out to millions of people at scale. And for this, you need to be able to have autonomous systems. And Soul Machine's goal is to basically humanize artificial intelligence. And it's to create natural, empathetic, and intelligent interaction with technology in the same way that we interact with people, face to face. It's the most powerful and effective form of communication. So Soul Machines does this by basically creating digital humans which have senses and behaviors and so forth like real people. So I'll show you a quick introduction. So all of the animations that you're seeing on these are recorded live and are generated by computational models, creating every single eye movement. So our digital people are employed around the world by different brands today in a whole range of different roles, ranging from healthcare, mental health applications, to financial technology, to even real estate and education. And each use case needs its own type of digital person. So we have a system which allows you to design your own digital person and choose to fit the demographic that you want to go after. So we have a product called DDNA Studio that allows you to do that. And
I was made in the groundbreaking digital DNA blender and effortlessly launched using our DDNA Studio with only a few clicks. My identity and personality were crafted by blending features like skin texture and tone, face shape, eye color, voice, language, and of course, hair. Now, in minutes, anyone can create a unique, high-quality digital person that embodies the soul of a brand.
And so this particular digital human is working for the Pan American Health Organization as a alcohol therapist.
Hello, Paula.
Buenos días.
Bom dia.
Hola.
Oi.
Buenos días.
Oi.
É prazer te conhecer. O que você gostaria de falar hoje? Hi, I'm Paula. I'm the Pan American Health Organization's first digital health specialist on alcohol use. I was built to provide reliable information about the impact alcohol can have on your health. I can also help you check if your drinking is putting your health at risk and guide you through a plan to cut back. Do you think you could benefit from drinking less?
I know I would. Can you please help me?
I'd love to help you. And I promise I won't judge. I'm a digital person after all. I don't know how to judge.
So, because they're fully 3D, you can combine them with three-dimensional environments, and the interaction of digital humans with content in a 3D world is what we're expecting from the metaverse.
Digital worlds, where new markets and new opportunities are emerging. It's a place where more and more people are choosing to work and play. This is where the metaverse begins. We're creating an immersive 3D world that can be experienced on more platforms and more devices, so that we can meet our customers wherever they are. I'll see you there.
Now, you can also animate all kinds of other faces. It doesn't have to be realistic people. We can pretty much animate anything. And so the metaverse will be full of all kinds of different characters. The bounds are limited only by our imagination. And we're also doing digital celebrities. So these are things like virtual musicians or sports stars. And we recently made a model of the golfer Jack Nicklaus, but he's 80 at the moment, so we made him 40 years old, and he can speak other languages with his own voice, including Japanese. Now, that's the sort of commercial side of the business. On the R&D side, we're really looking at how do we really make an autonomous character? How do we really bring something to life in a way that it's teachable, it has emotion, it basically makes its own decisions? And for this, our key research vehicle is a model called BabyX. And I'll just show a quick video. And BabyX has a cognitive architecture which drives what it does. So we use biology as a template for this. So BabyX has a motor system, decision-making and planning systems, visual systems, proprioception, and even imagination. And so BabyX has a architecture which is controlling its body from the inside out. Normal animation works from the outside in. An animator does it, but BabyX's brain drives her.
This is BabyX. She's one of the most advanced brain simulations in the world, and she's enjoying playing a peekaboo game with me. So, what is BabyX?
It's a virtual infant simulation. It's trying to create the elements which put together aspects of what makes something lifelike.
BabyX isn't an animation. She's a virtual human, and all of the behaviors are generated by neural networks. She watches and listens to what I do and makes her own decisions in real time about how to respond. If I teach her that this is a duck using associative learning, then something amazing happens that we do as well. We just take it completely for granted. Now watch what happens in BabyX's brain when I say the word duck to her. Duck. Her brain builds a link between the word duck and an actual duck. We can see that BabyX is looking at the spider and there's no reaction. But I'm now going to tell her it's something she should be scared of. Scary spider! The spider now provokes a clear fear response. The sight of the spider triggers specific parts of her brain. Her amygdala initiates a cascade of reactions which send chemicals into her system, generating the physical and emotional feelings of fear. When we take the spider away, she calms down. And when we bring it back, we can see she's now scared of it. When Baby X presses the green button, a duck appears. And when she presses the red button, a snake appears. As Baby X continues to press the buttons, her brain begins to form new connections. She wants to see a duck, so she's working out pressing the green button gets her what she wants. This ability to learn sequences and to predict what might be about to happen next is crucial to everything we do. We all know that making eye contact is a powerful way to create a sense of connection. There's a chemical in your brain called oxytocin, the hug drug, which also has an amazing effect on how we connect with other people. I'm going to increase her levels of oxytocin, and let's see what effect that has. Baby X makes a clear shift to focus on eye contact. We're connecting, and she even gives me a smile. Inside Baby X's brain, we can see oxytocin being released. Here it's the greeny blue bits secreted by her pituitary gland. The simple act of connection means she's rewarded with oxytocin, which makes her seek even more connection. And even though I'm interacting with a digital baby, the same thing is happening inside my brain.
So all of these elements are happening in everybody all the time when we're interacting with each other. We are very complex beings, and so to have true interaction with technology, you need a really holistic approach. Now, human cooperation is the most powerful force in history. It's put a person on the moon, it's created medicine, incredible works of art, and so forth. But it's human cooperation with intelligent machines which will define the next era of history. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the fascinating demos. It's kind of fun to see Baby X. We'll have some questions on that later. The session that you are joining with us is called The Secrets of Digital Humans and the Metaverse. And it's quite obvious to me that Metaverse will change the way that we live because it will change the frame or the window with which you see the world, both digital and analog. And so in order for us to understand it properly, we first had Mark, who gave us a sneak peek, a quick glimpse at what types of experiences you'll have, what types of digital humans and digital entities and beings that you might get to experience and meet with and interact with in the Metaverse. Second presenter is Asaf Ashkenazi, CEO of EverySight. And EverySight is a company that builds these hardware windows or displays that will help us see Metaverse in a completely different light. So, Asaf, take it away.
Thanks, Yoon. Good morning. Many years ago, I was working in an augmented reality company. I'm talking about the pre-iPhone era, the smartphone era. And we were making this fascinating augmented reality technology. One day, one of the large eyewear companies came to us, called Oakley, from the United States, and they were looking for a partner that can put technology inside their eyewear. They had this vision. Can we put electronics inside eyewear? I'm talking many, many years back. So I was lucky enough to go there. I took the best technology we had at hand, put it in my bag, flew to California, and met with them. When I came in, they showed me this very nice and sleeky eyewear and asked me, can you put your fascinating technology, really state-of-the-art, inside these eyewear? So I opened my bag, and I showed them the best and smallest technology that we had. Okay? This is what we had, a very big gap. I came from the aerospace business. A lot of technologies that we see around us come from aerospace, also augmented reality. And this is what we had at the time. So the gap was huge. And EverySight eventually spin-off out of this corporation called Elbit Systems, one of the largest defense companies in the world, in order to bring the promise of the hardware into this really challenging but huge market called Metaverse. And I'm going to show you a few things and talk to you about a few secrets that I have learned over the years about the Metaverse. Now, I'm an engineer, innovator, and many times, you know, one of our mistakes that we do is that we invent something that doesn't have a market. So I think today it's a known secret the metaverse is becoming a real market. It's a $1 trillion market, a 5 trillion, 10 trillion market. But in order to be in that market, it has to have some kind of a smart device. That's the gate into that really unique metaverse. But really, in order to be in that market, you need to have some kind of a smart head-worn device. It's not enough to have your phone. You need something better than that in order to be in that world, in order to consume it. So that's really the first secret. Now that we understand that you have to have a device, the question is, that's it? Okay. Is there one device that fits all? Now, I'm not talking about all people. I'm talking about all applications. Okay? Because some people, some companies think, yeah, we can make one device for all the metaverse. Is that true or not? It's a question. So in order to answer that question, you have to put all the different markets, applications that are relevant to the metaverse, okay, and try to see if there's anything that links them together. Okay? Is there something common to that? So here I put a list. Is gaming and defense requiring the same solution? Entertainment, sports and outdoor, the same solution? Not sure. But the pattern that you start seeing is that there are systems that require an immersive experience and other systems that require an augmented reality solution, overlaying information on top of the world. So saying that, I think that you can carefully say that you can take the metaverse, from one side say there's a virtual verse, and from the other side we call that the mobile verse. Two verses combined together creating the metaverse. One of them requiring a digital opaque display and the other one an augmented overlaying information through an optical system on top of the world. Now I'm going to talk and focus only on the mobile verse. Now, in my opinion, this is the biggest secret of all. Think about it for a second. Humans need to wear that in public, okay? Not in your private room, but in public. And that's a huge challenge, because if you look at the state of the art that there is today, and I just put here a few examples, would you take that and use that in public? I'll leave you to answer that. So the coolness factor by far is the number one. And if you're not there, if you're not fashionable, don't go there. I'm telling you. So if you want to design something, it has to be fashionable. The good thing is, once you're done that, so secret number 4 tells you, yeah, if you have the coolness factor sorted out, you're almost there. You just need to overcome just a few factors in order to make that work. So I just put here a partial list of the things that you need to make sure that come together with the solution that you're bringing on. And it's a much longer list than what you see over here. So this is the challenge. It's a huge challenge to do that. Now, I wanted to give you an example, just to give you an idea. Let's assume that you want to have this beautiful color display with a nice field of view, let's say like a 65, 75-inch TV in front of you, on a cool system that you wear. Now, we're talking about mobile verse, so it has to work outdoors or practically in all light conditions, day and night. It's very, very important. And also, it has to work for several hours. Not 1 or 2 hours, full day. 6, 8 hours at least, continuous. Okay, that's the challenge. How do you do that? Now, the interesting part is you have to make that thing encapsulated inside an cool, fashionable eyewear that weighs no more than 50 grams. Now, 50 grams is practically the magic number of eyewear that you can wear all day. If it's more than 50 grams, it won't work. So remember that number. So it has to be there. Now, what people don't know is that regular eyewear weigh about 30, 35 grams. So the optics, the electronics, the battery have to weigh no more than 15 grams. That's what you have. So think about it. We have to build a TV, a color TV, 65, 75 inch, working a full day on a battery, and all we have is 15 grams in order to do that. That's the challenge. The second big challenge is obviously the cost. So people won't buy that for thousands of dollars, probably hundreds of dollars. It's a challenge. How do you make that, in less than a few $100s? It's a huge challenge as well. So just giving you an example about that. So what do you think? Do you think that you can build a system that gives you a crisp color, beautiful display, full color, day and night, working 6 to 8 hours? Is that achievable? So today, I want to show you the first system in the world that meets that. Okay? This system is practically in production today. Gives you exactly the same parameters I showed there. It weighs less than 50 grams. It has a beautiful color display. Has a nice 65-inch TV in front of you. Full brightness. You can work outside in a beautiful day like today. Day and night. Works more than 8 hours. And the cost? Well, stay tuned. It's going to be out in the market early next year. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Asaf. By the way, we all had a chance to try this new product that Asaf just introduced into the public. And rest assured, it does work. It's very functional. It's a very cool experience. We enjoyed it very much. As I mentioned earlier, Metaverse is a very vague term, and it bothers a lot of people that it's vague. But I think it's also natural because it's not here yet. There's great potential in the Metaverse itself. And the third and final speaker, Enrique Dans, who's a professor at IE Business School, will help us kind of unveil the various layers of the Metaverse and its secrets. And the term Metaverse is often associated with the company Meta. And I think Mark Zuckerberg really did a good land grab in naming his company Meta. But we all truly feel that Metaverse should be not pertaining to a certain company. It should actually be meta. And so Enrique will talk about the various layers and aspects of Metaverse, drawing analogies with the internet revolution 20 years ago. Enrique?
Thank you. Okay, so let me try to draw a parallelism between what happened when the internet started, when we started to call the internet or the web or something like that, and think about what happens now when someone starts to tell us that this is the way we're going to be interacting. Okay? And this happens right after a pandemic, when we started to work from home, when we started to relate to each other in video conferences, we spent countless hours on Zoom, and all of a sudden we need to imagine ourselves walking in a virtual world like this. Well, walking is not exactly walking because we are legless, so it's not easy to walk when you're legless. You probably forget about that after a while, but anyway. And they tell us that, okay, this is the way we're going to look like. And so if this is the way Mark Zuckerberg himself looks like, I mean, after, he can design, he can spend as many hours as he wants designing his avatar, etc. And in the end, it looks like this. Well, I don't know. So I'm not sure. Are we talking about we are talking about the company that changed its name to try to own the concept of the metaverse, and this is what they are right now giving to us, this kind of, dull avatar, and explaining us that this is the place we are going to be. And if you want to join this place called, the Horizon Worlds, what do you have to do? You have to go and sign terms and agreements and enter this virtual world. Okay? So what happens when they try to convince us that this place is actually the metaverse? Well, what happens is that they are starting to own the name because they want to, obviously, build some sort of business on top of it. Apparently, they are launching a digital clothing store. You can purchase outfits, etc. So, okay, the question is this the metaverse? Because what I would like to think is that the metaverse is more related to, I don't know, digital humans or devices that we can use to check what happens all around us in every moment, etc. But this is, I don't know, slightly more limited. I see here something that reminds me of Second Life, perhaps, 10 or 12 years ago. But I don't see the idea of the metaverse here. So the problem is that when we start thinking about all this, well, this is another example. This is the metaverse that Accenture built using Microsoft technology to make demos to their customers, to their clients, etc. So we have other examples that people say this is the metaverse, this is Decentraland. Well, this is actually me in Decentraland. Well, after creating my avatar in 2 minutes, no more than that. Okay, so is this the metaverse or is this something different? I mean, what I think it's important here is figuring out the layers. And this is, from my perspective, what is truly important. The first requisite for a metaverse to be called metaverse is it has to be decentralized. It has to resemble the internet. On the internet, when it was created, there was a protocol, the TCP/IP, and on top of that protocol, anyone could go and build whatever they wanted. You could build a website, you could build your presence, anyone could go ahead and build whatever they wanted. Okay? If it's not the metaverse, it's a virtual world. It's let's say a glorified video game, and then it's centralized with some terms of service. Okay? It's not open source, it's only for insiders. It's not transparent. It's not just a transparent protocol. No. It's opaque. It's built on an engine that you have to ask for permission to do things. So this is the idea. I mean, what are we building? If we build a metaverse where we can all go and build whatever we want, then we are talking about the parallelism with what happened with the internet, when the internet started. If we are talking about just a virtual world or a glorified video game, this is not going to happen. I mean, I can understand why a company would want to monopolize that and convince us that we need to sign their terms of service, open an account with them, and play inside this place, but it's not what we want. What we want is an open, decentralized, cryptographically enforced place where we can build whatever we want. Okay? So the idea here is, okay, are we going to wear this to be on the metaverse? Well, it is an option. You can also play or do things on the metaverse just on your screen or your regular screen. Or you can use this device that Asaf just showed us to feel the metaverse around us. Or perhaps, I don't know, from choosing Pokemon in Pokemon Go or doing other things. Okay? So there's a number of possibilities, but this is not what I believe is important. What I believe is important is the layer below that, on top of which we build these things. Okay? So what happens? We need to understand that we are talking about something called Web3, and Web3 is the place, the foundation, where on top of which you build the metaverse. This turns the metaverse into the graphical expression or interface for Web3. What do we need for Web3? Well, I would never dare to put an academic paper in a forum like this. Academic papers are boring, as you know. But this academic paper is interesting. First of all, we don't know the author. We don't know whether the author is a he, a she, a dog, or a group of people. No way to know. And this was the first moment when we saw cryptography becoming, let's say, real as a way to do something interesting, hacking money, creating money in a different way, or reimagining money. Okay, what if we take this, or the foundation below this, which is the blockchain, and we use it as the new protocol on top of TCP/IP for Web3. This will allow us to build a cryptographically enforced web, a web where whatever you do, anything you do, appears here as a transaction on the blockchain. So in the end, the web itself becomes a place that cannot deceive you, because anything you do, any transaction, becomes here embedded on the blockchain, fully distributed, etc. So try to imagine, I mean, we are using the internet, all of us, every single day, continuously. How much do you know about the building block of the internet, TCP/IP? Probably not much. I don't know, if I ask you, if we are very geeky, we know the technical foundation of TCP/IP, of this family of protocols. If you're not, you know you are using it, but that's it. You don't need much. The blockchain is going to be pretty much in the same situation. We are all going to be using the blockchain on a regular basis, but we won't realize about it. And we don't need to know all the technical underpinnings of the blockchain. What we know is that in the original version of the web, in Web 1, what we were able to do as users was mostly clicking, reading, watching, and that was it. You couldn't create stuff. Unless you were very geeky, in order to create things on the original version of the web, you needed to master, I don't know, HTML or HTTP protocol, or manage a server, or things like that, that regular people wouldn't do. When we evolved into Web 2, Web 2 was when a number of companies appeared and gave us instruments, simple instruments, that we could use to, for instance, create an account. You could go to, I don't know, Facebook or Twitter, create your account, and from then on, what could you do? Create things. You could write something, or, I don't know, videotape something, publish it on the web, and it was your content. It's the two-way web. This is Web 2. When we evolve, what do we do? Well, we change a few things. What was the problem with Web 1? Too limited. What was the problem with Web 2? In order to do all these nice things, we empowered several companies to give us things like our identities, our, I don't know, habits, what do we do on a regular basis, and these companies, the Googles, Apples, etc. of the world, became huge because we gave them a lot of power. What are we doing in Web 3? Recovering all that power. We want to be the ones that confer ourselves, for instance, our identity. So we use the blockchain and we start reimagining the web. The wallet will be our identity. So my cryptographically enforced wallet will be not only the place where I put my, for instance, cryptocurrencies. No. It will be the place where I put my identity, the place, the instrument I use to identify myself. Okay? It could be a wallet, a physical wallet, or a software wallet. But I'm going to use it as a way to identify myself, because on the Metaverse, we are all avatars, and it would be very easy for me to get an avatar for myself impersonating, I don't know, Asaf here. And I would be going all over the place as Asaf and then saying hi. And
feel free.
Exactly. The thing is, I need to demonstrate that, that this is me and not him. So in order to do that, I will need to use my cryptographically enforced wallet. What else do I need? Well, look at this, for instance. Decentraland offers you the possibility to play using your wallet. So at least it is cryptographically enforced. It's one step beyond. Okay? Then tokens. What do we tokenize? Whatever you tokenize, you can put it on, obviously, the blockchain. So we will be tokenizing everything, transactions, etc. Anything from property, real estate, contracts become a token. Any asset that you can divide into little pieces, and then you put these pieces on the blockchain. Okay? If it is a monetary transaction, you use cryptocurrencies. If it's non-monetary, you use an NFT, okay? A non-fungible token that represents whatever you want. Okay? And then, what do you need? Well, imagine, for instance, if I want to generate a token right now for you to be able to demonstrate that you were here today, I would be generating a POAP, a proof of attendance protocol token, that you could mint to demonstrate, for instance, on LinkedIn, that you were attending this session. And we will be doing that all the time. Then smart contracts. This is a piece of code. If the clauses happen, then the conditions get fulfilled and you get something in return. And on top of this, you can build a full corporation. What is a corporation? Or is a company? A bunch of contracts. So you can build a decentralized autonomous organization on top of that. So these are the structures, these are the things we need to build the metaverse. If you check Decentraland, you will realize that they have, the moment you open an account with your wallet on Decentraland, you become a citizen. And as a citizen, what can you do? You can vote. You can make decisions. Okay? This is more like akin to what we are imagining as the metaverse. It's still very limited, but on top of this, of something completely decentralized, open, etc., this is where we need to imagine the place where we will be relating, talking to each other, working, etc. If we miss the cryptographically enforced part, we will be basically playing video games. This is where I think the big difference is. If you feel a little bit like this, like, oh my God, this is going really fast, it's because it is going very fast. So if you feel like you're, well, this is the way innovation happens. So if you feel like you are in the matrix, well, we are starting to build the matrix to a certain extent, as we have seen in the previous demonstrations. Okay, so these are just a few pieces of the puzzle, just a few elements for discussion. So now in the panel.
Y'all ready for this?
If you feel you're ready for this, fantastic, go for it. Because what we need to do now is, you know what? Hacking the world. So let's go and hack the world. Okay? Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you, Enrique, for a very comprehensive presentation of the current world of Metaverse. We have about 20 minutes for questions. And one of the cool things about you being in the physical verse is your opportunities to ask questions to the leading authorities. It's kind of cool, and I think the organizers have designed this with a purpose. It's that we have an expert in user experience and digital humans, we have an expert in digital displays and hardware, and we have an expert, an academic, on future innovation and technology, all in one venue. So while you think about what questions you want to ask, I'm going to start off as moderator. And by the way, moderator seems such a dull role. I'm not going to make things moderate, but I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to try to provoke and ignite and maybe stimulate your senses. The first question is, your definition of metaverse might be slightly different. So if someone asks you, what is the metaverse? What is the definition of a metaverse, of the metaverse? What would be your answer, Mark?
For me, I think it's just a wrapper term for everything. So it includes the current internet, it includes phones or whatever, but it's just everything that you can view on multiple devices. So it's a wrapper term for me.
Well, for me, I would say that combining the physical and the digital together, I would say that would be the first part of the metaverse. It could become totally digital, but I believe that we will start with something that combines the physical and digital lands and verses together.
For me, it's the graphical, immersive representation of the web. So the place where we build things in a graphical, immersive environment. enforced by cryptography.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. All kind of in a common ground, but all have different facets and views and aspects. That's cool. We'll now turn to the audience. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand, and I think the staff member will help you get a microphone. Do you have any questions for the panel? Don't be shy. Yep.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your wonderful presentations and views. Now, I am in charge of leadership education, and also I have these programs that I'm developing for enhancing digital literacy for businesses, for out of business. Starting from 2 years ago, I think that Metaverse has become increasingly a big thing because of the pandemic especially, and it's further expanding. But based on my experience, well, last year, we had tried to utilize a virtual human for a leadership program. And for 1 hour, we tried to have a digital human lead 3 sessions. But there were 2 problems. First of all, the TTS technology, text-to-speech technology. In terms of English, well, the motions and the movements of the mouth was very natural, but most of the executives here in Korea are Koreans. And so all of the emotions and the movements of the mouth seemed quite unnatural. And so it seemed like what we did was we had to invite an actor and utilize a human being in the process and have that once again somehow apply to creating a digital human again. So when we had to go through that process, we thought, if we had to do this, all of this, why do we need a digital human? So I'm thinking, how much time would it cost or need to have a real natural human, digital human that we can utilize? And number 2, well, sometimes I think that there are people who really look at the digital humans and think, so how good can you be, rather than focusing on the contents that they're delivering. So I'm curious, especially for the first and the second speaker, I think that the software and the hardware have to be in place to overcome these challenges. So these challenges on top of the language barriers and the unnatural aspects of the motions, and also for the learners who are learning from the digital humans, in order for them to really easily accept them and embrace them, how long of a time do you think?
마크한테 통역 좀 할게요. So Mark, since you did not actually have the interpreter, I'm going to translate the question, primarily for you, Mark, and for Asaf. So he's in charge of leadership program that involves digital humans to train employees in leadership. And the first question is, in Korean, we talked about phasings and lips movements and text-to-speech synthesis. That in English it's decent, but in Korean is not so much. So that's one gap or chasm that he feels, the naturalness of Korean-speaking digital humans. Second thing is the creation of content. Is that because it's unnatural, they had to actually hire voice actors and stage actors to simulate a digital human. And the argument was, if we're going to do that for every application, why do you have the digital human in the first place? Because you can't automate. And the third aspect is, even if you have a digital human, the learning efficacy is what matters the most. And in this situation, he experienced that the users actually had a little chasm between the digital humans, saying, how reliable or how credible or how effective is this human in teaching me something or educating? So he thinks that these types of chasms and gaps will be obviously reduced and resolved, and it might require the combination and deep integration of software and hardware. So his question is, how long do you see that from happening? All these different challenges being resolved, and how can software and hardware actually work together? Probably is a question for Asaf. So.
Right. First question on the visemes, which is the lip shapes for different languages. So it's a complex problem because of things like co-articulation. When you're actually forming a word, it totally depends on the history of what you've been saying. So we've built models for English, Japanese, and some European languages. We've made a prototype actually in Korean, I was too scared to show it to you because you'd probably, we have some Korean staff in our company and they think our model is okay. They don't think it's great, but they think it's okay. But that's something which is a matter of just getting the shapes right with the sound. And so I think that's very doable. We can do it today. It's just a matter of how much iteration that you put into that. The second question was?
The second question is kind of digital chasm that exists between humans and digital humans in terms of learning efficacy, relationship building, credibility, trust, and efficacy.
And so obviously there's a really long way to go on this. So at the moment it's really about concentrating on what makes the most sense. What are the simplest sort of use cases that actually work well today? For me, the fundamental point of it, the reason that you have a digital human, and by the way, all of our animations aren't animated, they're autonomously generated, so you don't need to motion capture anybody. The system generates the animation. So when it sees something, it looks at it, it has an emotional system which is driving its behavior. All of those things are autonomously generated. That's the sort of main goal of our company, is to make animation, the system animates itself. Now, with the use cases for that, or the efficacy, it's all about communication. How do I get something across? How do I emphasize something? How can I tell what the user's focusing on? So face-to-face interaction, it's about, what am I paying attention to? How can I express emotion with that? Can I emphasize certain things? So it's the difference between how you would create a automatic presenter for information to enhance communication, and there's a road to go to get to that, to have the realistic rapport of real people. And when real people are communicating, you have to understand theory of mind. You need to know what somebody's thinking or guess what they're thinking. But there's certain sort of steps along the road where you can create really useful things on that way.
I think that on the hardware side, actually it's quite solved. I think the challenge is actually in Mark's place. Because today we have the cloud infrastructure and we have the connectivity, the 5, the 6G, the Wi-Fi 6 and everything. So based on those capabilities, I would say that providing that information into some kind of a smart device that you have with you, whether it's your phone or your glasses, that's a challenge that I think it's easily overcome. Okay, so really I believe that Mark has a lot of work to do before that.
Indeed, indeed.
I can see a challenge anyway. I mean, I noticed, for instance, that when Meta introduced the Horizons World in Spain and in France, they did it for English speakers. So they are introducing it in Spain. Of course, there's a significant number of people in Spain that speaks English, like here in Korea, but they didn't launch it in Spanish yet. So obviously there's a challenge there. But I wouldn't underestimate the power of technology here. I mean, there's a market for it, that's for sure. And what we know, for instance, is that now we can be talking to a digital assistant without realizing it is a digital assistant. In fact, if you use the Google Assistant in the US, now it's apparently, well, not exactly mandatory, but highly recommended that the Google Assistant initiates a phone call by saying, hello, I'm Google Assistant working for this person. So identifies itself as a digital assistant. I don't know if this is a legal requirement or something. As soon as you can't recognize, if you're not warned that you're talking to a digital assistant, this means the technology is very well done. So if there's a market for it and there's competition, we're going to get it soon.
It's true, and there's similar services here in South Korea as well. Any other questions for the panel? Yes, the person in the front.
So thank you for your presentations today. I think it was a very insightful time. So my name is Yesun. I originally work at Kakao Webtoon, which is a digital comics company in Korea. But today I'm here with Posa Labs, which is an AI music startup. So before my question, just like a brief background. The topics that you touched upon today, so keywords like Metaverse and NFT, they've been quite the hype. here in Korea as well, and many are still trying to figure out what it is and how to incorporate it into our lives and into our businesses. And while many large and small companies are jumping on the bandwagon, as they say, out of maybe fear of missing out, some people remain skeptical and maybe even cynical. And with such reactions to Web3 and its elements, we're also seeing some movement from big tech like Google and Apple, especially in terms of data privacy, like Apple's ATT. And so with this background, well, this might be a very blunt question, but how certain are you that Web3 and its elements are the next big thing?
I think it's something that we are building right now, and we are in a very early stage. So we are playing with certain things. The first evolution of NFTs, for instance, was clearly very playful, although many people lost money, etc. I mean, what were we doing with the original NFTs? Just demonstrating that something, typically a piece of digital art, was the original, which is something that you have to struggle a little bit with the concept, because in digital art, the original and the copy are identical, because it's digital, zeros and ones, okay? It's not the same concept of, as if you go to a museum and you want to buy the picture there hanging on the wall. You normally cannot do that, but you can go downstairs and buy some reproduction of it, some copy, okay? You're not going to be able to convince your visits that you have, I don't know, Las Meninas from Velázquez hanging on your living room, unless you have a digital certificate saying this is true. Okay, so what's the difference? The difference is that now we are going to build upon that concept and start using NFTs for everything. In music, for instance, they are becoming big to identify the piece of music that is sounding, in avatars, in contracts, in all that stuff. I think what changes everything is the fact that the blockchain used to be a very cumbersome and expensive protocol, and now we are making it much easier. If you are following the news about the merge, for instance, now Ethereum is not proof of work, it's proof of stake. That makes it much faster, much easier, nimble, cheaper, less consuming. So what can we do now? Start using the blockchain for everything. Okay? Am I certain that this is the next evolution? No, there's no way to be certain, but I think there's enough number of use cases being built as for the rest of the industries, competitors, etc., to consider it the next challenge.
Right. Any other questions? Yes, the gentleman in the front.
Thank you for your presentation. Very inspired by your insight. I think many companies tend to focus on seeing and glass technology. Then my question is, how long does it take to achieve technology like tasting, smelling, or touching, then feeling physically each other more immersively, like film Ready Player One by Steven Spielberg?
I think that's a great question, because touch is actually the most fundamental human sense, and so we grow up as babies being held and so forth, and so it's the tactile. I think that tactile technologies are going to be very important, and smell is also one of the most fundamental biological senses, chemical sensing. So those two things at the moment are not available when you interact with a computer typically. I mean, there's haptic technologies and there's smell technologies being developed, but they're important, and there'll be a lot of things. Proprioception is another one, the feeling of your body moving in space and so forth. These problems need to be solved, because I don't think, like movies like Ready Player One, I don't think people are going to be happy running around on a treadmill with these things. We're going to want to feel the sun, the warmth of the sun, this type of technology is probably only truly going to be fully immersive where we actually have a matrix-like implant.
Yeah. So haptic technology is a great example of how the analog world and the world that we live in interacts and faces with the digital world. And the theme of this current forum is supercompensation. And of course, this terminology is used in the context of restoring and building global prosperity and freedom. But there's a supercompensation, in my opinion, in another light, which is compensating for all of the digital acceleration, and especially through the pandemic, the lack of analog experiences will drive us towards yearning more for analog digital offline online interactions. Sure. So a follow-up question to all those speakers is, how do you see the supercompensation in terms of analog versus digital, and going back to analog, affecting what you do as a startup, technology builder, and as an innovator?
So I think that for me personally, I have a love-hate relationship with technology. I like to be out in nature, but I'm amazed at what you can do with technology. And I think for a healthy life, you don't want to be online all the time. You don't want to be in the metaverse all the time. You want to combine the things. You know, talk to digital people, be in your AR or VR world, but go and interact with real people. You know, we talked about touch. You know, that's something, those things matter. And, you know, I heard somebody say that, and, you know, the most important thing for people is care, you know, to be cared. And the best way that you can show care to somebody is to spend time with them. And that's a sort of one-on-one thing. So I think that there has to be a healthy balance where you have a life in the metaverse of full imagination. You can do anything that you want, but we have to bring it back to our biological beings in the real world.
I totally agree with him. You know, we develop technologies, really amazing stuff, but at the end of the day, you know, we're human beings, and this basic interaction between us that you cannot compensate for in the digital world. So, and I think this haptic challenge is huge. It's actually very tough to do that. Okay, it requires a lot of stuff on you, I don't know, cumbersome solutions. So I wouldn't take that technology there, not in the beginning. We have to start with the basics. But, you know, I can see my kids, you know, they're all the time with the technology with them. I don't like them to be there so much. I would really appreciate if they can balance their lives, see their friends, and then, you know, use technology where you need to use that. That's personally my opinion.
Yeah, balancing is fundamental. I mean, and in order to balance, people think that we need to deprive our kids from using technology until they develop some sort of responsibility. I think the other way around. The earlier you give them the access to technology, the more they normalize it. And then through education, you can obviously exert some control and some... I think that the important part here is not about replicating everything we have in regular life into a new place. I mean, do I need a smell on the metaverse? I'm not sure. I mean, would it be more realistic? Yes, but I tend to concentrate on the things that I think can augment us. I'm a professor. I teach. During the pandemic, how did I teach? Well, I was teaching on Zoom or similar tools. How did I feel? Limited or augmented? At the beginning of the pandemic, I was clearly feeling limited. I was speaking from sharing my presentation and then speaking from a little corner of the screen, like a little Smurf there. Hey, I'm here, I'm here. It was really, boring. Later on, I learned how to virtualize my camera, how to combine certain aspects, how to combine my presentation with myself, even be able to walk like I walk normally when I teach. And my students could not only interrupt me and participate, they could do it with a slide, with their own, sharing a slide, sharing a web page, etc. After a while, I realized my classes were becoming better than before. As soon as you master the technology, typically I used to say, I prepare a class. Before the pandemic, I was preparing my classes. After the pandemic, I produce my classes. I became my own producer. I am doing things as a digital producer of my classes that before the pandemic I wasn't able to do. When we jump into the metaverse, I want to be able to do that. And I remember because I taught in Second Life a long time ago. And in Second Life, it was like teaching with my avatar, and I could fly. I'm not going to do it today because, but if you want me to fly, and imagine I could be addressing you here and talking to you, and then all of a sudden, if she asks a question over there, I could fly and approach you. Okay, I can do that in the metaverse. It's easy. Anything that makes us augmented looks interesting.
Yeah. Disruption with balance and technology for good and for mankind is, I think, the key word. Well, an hour has passed by pretty quickly, in my opinion. We're out of time. Thank you again for the distinguished speakers for their insights and their wisdom and knowledge. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you very much. That wraps up our session.
Thank you once again to the moderator and speakers. Next conversation with Ray Dalio, Big Cycle of the Global Economy session will begin at 11:30 a.m. So please return to the Seoul by 11:25. Thank you. We'll now begin the session, Conversation with Ray Dalio, Big Cycle of the Global Economy. The moderator for this session is Kim Yong-bom, former Vice Minister of Economy and Finance of the Republic of Korea. So please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Hello everyone, my name is Yong-bom Kim, former Vice Minister of Economy and Finance for the Republic of Korea. Today is an incredibly special occasion as I am honored to join Ray Dalio, world-renowned founder and CIO of Bridgewater Associates, to discuss about the forces that are restructuring the world order and how we can navigate through these uncertain times. The global economy has experienced quite a bit of volatility due to a series of unfortunate events, starting with the pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine war, coupled with skyrocketing inflation and the rapid interest rate hikes. All of this chaos has made it difficult to predict the future and make informed investment decisions. Amidst all this noise, I thought that there was no one else better to consult than one of the most legendary investors and scholars of our time. Before we officially start, I'd like to briefly introduce Mr. Dalio, though I'm sure his reputation speaks for itself. Mr. Dalio has been an avid global investor for close to 50 years. He founded and cultivated Bridgewater Associates into the world's biggest and most successful hedge fund, and his insight and principles have garnered worldwide fanfare, myself included. He most recently released another groundbreaking bestseller, Principles for Dealing with a Changing World Order, which will be the focus of our interview today. So without further ado, let's begin. First off, thank you for taking time off your busy schedule to make this happen. It truly means a lot to all of your fans here in Korea. I want to begin by highlighting the 5 forces that you mentioned in your book. We'll go into more detail with each first. But first, I think it will set the tone of our interview nicely if you could give an overview of these 5 forces.
My pleasure. And thank you very much for having me. I look forward to speaking with your audience because it really is a special audience who is very intellectually engaged. So thank you. The 5 forces that are now existing and have existed through time and drive the cycles as we see them, cycles of rises and declines of markets and economies and societies and empires, are first the credit, money, and economic cycle. When there is a lot more spending than there is income earning, it produces a lot of debt. That credit, as it comes out, produces buying power. If you want to get an economy going, you produce a lot of credit, a lot of borrowing power. And of course, that borrowing power means that there's a requirement to pay back. And so economic cycles are largely driven by credit cycles. And then that relationship happens in a big way over a long period of time. We see short-term credit cycles, and then we see big long-term credit cycles. So today, there is a desire, a need to spend a lot more money globally than there is in taking in an income. That creates buying power, produces a lot of debt. And the question is, when that debt is paid back, will that be paid back with hard money? In other words, money of equal value because the quantity won't change much? or will it be paid back with depreciated money? And of course, it's much easier to pay back with depreciated money. So you see central banks produce a lot of money to buy debt, typically government debt, and that cycle produces stimulation, inflation, and the stagflation that we're seeing now. So that money and credit is producing, is enormous. It's producing a lot of inflation. And with that, then there's a tightening of monetary policy. Tightening of monetary policy is very simple. It takes buying power away. So you see the combination of higher inflation squeezing purchasers, and also the reduced availability of money and credit to buy higher inflation. And that becomes a stagflation environment, such as we had in the 70s. So that is a global phenomenon. It interrelates with the other components, such as what's going on politically, that has an effect on inflation because of the fact that disruptions occur. And we'll get to that in a minute. So the second big force is the force of internal conflict. When there are problems like we are seeing now, and there are big disagreements and big wealth gaps that exist throughout history, we see that growing conflicts take place, and growing extremism in populism tends to occur. We're seeing growing populism in the United States, for example. A populist is a person who fights for one side to win over the other side. They are from the left and they are from the right, and they will win at all costs. They are people who are not compromisers. Compromising seems weak, so they are win at all cost type of people, and they are also very nationalistic. So you see the emergence of that. You started to see the emergence of that with Donald Trump. It was very, very obvious with Donald Trump, and we're seeing that around the world. In a minute, maybe we'll cover what the whole world looks like. So you're seeing the financial problems being accompanied by those domestic political problems causing conflict. So much so that it is conceivable that the systems may not, we may not have either side accepting losing in the next presidential election. So that's the second. The third is internal conflict arising from great power rivalries. In the cycle, a cycle really begins at the end of a war. So in World War II, we began a new world order. It was largely an American world order because the American was the dominant power out after that. And when there's a dominant power, others don't want to fight. And also, people are so sick of the fighting from the war that you typically have a period of peace and prosperity. Also, wars tend to wipe out debt, create lessen wealth gaps, and so on. But when you have two rising, leading, comparable world powers, history has shown that there is a conflict, a rising tension between those, and there are 5 types of wars, and we're seeing those wars now. There's a trade war, there's a technology war, there's a war for geopolitical influence, there is then an economic sanctions war, and then there is a military war. Those are the 5 types of war. You usually start with the first and you work your way up, and the military war, of course, is the greatest. And of course, we're seeing that progress. And then, so that's the third. The fourth, which came to my attention when I did the research of going back the last 500 years and also studying the Chinese dynasties, which have wonderful information starting in the Qin dynasty, which was about 221 BC. I watched the patterns, but we see it here, is cycles caused about by acts of nature, most importantly, droughts, floods, and pandemics. When I studied that history, I learned that they had more of an effect than wars and depressions and so on. But when they happened at the same time, there were big risks, big consequences. In China, they would call that confluence of factors, the loss of the mandate from heaven. So, and then the fifth big force, which is not cyclical, is man's ability to invent, such as technologies. And so you see over a period of time, those inventions are not cyclical, that learning builds on learning. And and that creates great advances. And that force is very, very strong now. There's a lot of intellectual invention, modern technologies and so on, our ability to come up with vaccines quickly and so on. That fifth force is a very positive force. But the first four forces are both cyclical and are right now very threatening.
Thank you very much for this excellent overview of the five forces. Let's delve more deeply into the first force, namely the creation of enormous amount of debt, which contribute to an unsustainable cycle of financing and large increase in currency issuance, as you mentioned. Really, there is no better illustration of the first force than the current predicament of the Fed faces after it went on a money printing spree back in 2020. In light of this, what road should the Fed take to minimize damages? Do you see an inevitable recession on the horizon?
Yes, so let's go through the mechanics. The government, the central government, has the power to spend and tax, but does not have the power to produce money. And the Federal Reserve has the power to produce money, but it doesn't have the power to spend and tax. Right now, we are in an environment where there's a need, or maybe certainly an action, of spending a lot more than is income. When anyone or any government spends more than they take in, they produce debt. And the question is, who is going to buy that debt? And what the central banks have done is to come in and print money and buy a lot of that debt to make up that gap. So the first mechanical problem is spending a lot more than one earns. And we see that today in many, many ways. When we think about social programs in different countries, particularly the United States, with large wealth gaps, that's one aspect. Another, of course, are wars. Like we think about the Ukraine war, what is the cost to rebuild the Ukraine? That's estimated between $700 billion and $1 trillion. Who is going to pay for that $700 to $1 trillion? Or do you let it remain in rubble? And so there are expenditures such as climate change. The climate change situation is that there have not been a great deal of progress to remediate the changes in climate. And now there are the needs and programs to make radical climate change moves that are going to be very expensive. And so we see those. We also see the need to spend more on military defense because of the other problems. So as we look at, generally speaking, budgets, what we see for most major currencies, most of the world's reserve currencies and most countries, is that there's more spending than there is earning. And as a result, there is more printing of money. And as a result of that, you have that dynamic. In addition, when money gets very cheap, financial participants and economic participants borrow. They borrow for consumption. They borrow for businesses. And so when we had zero or negative interest rates, and also easy, you can keep rolling over your debt, you had essentially free money. And all that has created deficits and spending that's great, which is being monetized. So that is producing the stagflation that we're seeing, which is also being contributed to by what is happening globally, geopolitically, where the supply chains are breaking down because of the combination of countries needing to be self-sufficient and creating barriers and desiring to build self-sufficiency. So that adds to the inefficiency and the inflation rate. And all of those things compound to produce the stagflation that we have. Of course, when you have stagflation, it produces greater political conflict. And that political conflict causes the left and the right to be more extreme and creates those political problems.
Moving on to the second force, huge wealth gaps and internal conflicts in all facets of society, gender conflict, race conflict, generational conflict, class conflict, topped off by political extremism. We are seeing all of this on display, not just in America, but throughout the world. Even in Korea, conflicts of such nature are reaching a boiling point. As someone who has studied the history of the rise and fall of empires and countries, how can we remedy this?
There's really only one way. I think it is understanding where that leads to and being fearful of that. Right now, that leads to internal and external wars. And if one studied those wars, one realizes that one does not want to go back to those wars. I think we have a generation problem, cycle after cycle, in that my father went through the war. Prior generations went through the war, and anyone who has gone through the war would say any of these wars and any of these financial bad policies would say that the cost of not having financial discipline and not working well together, and rather fighting internally and fighting externally, is so terrible that one would not want to do those things. I think that the history has shown that there is a tendency for it to increase, conflict to increase, not to decrease, as you get to irreconcilable differences, and it becomes power plays, and being a moderate is through all history, moderates were guillotined, hung, and so on. The you had to make a choice. Which side are you on? And you had to fight for that side. And so that's the direction that we're moving in. And so when you ask, how can it be changed? I think it comes back to the fear of that, the difference, the understanding the pictures and understanding the causes of that, because you have to change the psychology. You have to want a strong middle. You want to have your win-win relationships, not lose-lose relationships. So I think above all else, it has to be people's understanding of history and bringing that to today and saying, what do I want and what do I need to do to get it?
Wow, that's a quite sobering, message. Very, in some ways chilling, but I think all people and the generation should, heed your advice. Thanks. Tensions are clearly mounting between the U.S. and China, especially after Nancy Pelosi's recent visit to Taiwan and the U.S. approving $1 billion arms sale to Taiwan. The United States is also aggressively reshoring, and the SEC has threatened to delist many Chinese companies. China has retaliated by imposing sanctions of their own. This, as you mentioned previously, is a clear indication of the third force, external conflict. In light of China's challenge of the U.S. hegemony, do you think the U.S.-led world order will be supplanted in the near future? Will China be the dominant superpower, or will it perhaps be another rising country like India? And how should we navigate this inflection point as investors?
There is a world competitiveness conflict between China and the United States in those 5 areas I mentioned before. So trade, technology, geopolitical influence, economics, and then the military. What we see is a conflict of 2 very lethal great powers, particularly it's on the world scale, but it is also particularly centered in Taiwan. The big risk of military is Taiwan. And it is brinksmanship. We are playing brinksmanship. And it very much connects to the war in the Ukraine. There is a war going on in Europe between Russia and NATO countries in Europe. That militarily, it's been confined to the Ukraine and traditional conventional warfare in the middle. However, the economic warfare is very strong between them, as gas, for example, gas exports can be limited and so on. So the economic warfare is intense, and that's producing that type of problem. China relates to that. That is part. China, in this changing world order situation, for example, there's a question of whether the United States will continue to allow China or will make moves against China, providing trade assistance to Russia. So, for example, the buying of oil from Russia, and now the question of perhaps China responds to the $1 billion sale with a selling of military equipment to Russia. It's gotten extremely serious because, as you're probably aware, the U.S. ships went through the Taiwan Straits and so on. It's getting very, very serious. We have these two giants. If it's serious, even if there isn't a military conflict between these countries, because the economic consequences of the world, or the United States leading the world, to treat China similar to the way it treated Russia. In other words, it's not acceptable, politically acceptable, to take imports from China, for example. Or you can have isolation of Taiwan, which would be devastating to the world, and the chips that are needed, semiconductor chips that are needed to operate the world. So we are right at the brink of something that's very, very serious. It certainly is very, it is certainly very serious now, and it could become a great deal more. So when we look at the world, we see a Europe at war of the sort that they're describing, and could be worse. And you see China in the South China Sea. We've seen demonstrations of what China can do in terms of isolating Taiwan and doing other things. So we're at that. There is brinksmanship going on, and that's very dangerous. Of course, there are circumstances that exist in both countries that produce a lot of internal problems. Maybe if you want, I'll just touch on China's internal problems that are worth considering. Should I do that?
Go ahead, briefly.
Okay.
Yes.
China has financial problems arising from the real estate bubble not being adequately contained, and now passing to other parts of the economy. Real estate industry, building and the associated industries, accounts for nearly 30% of China's economy. So it, in and of itself, slowing down is a drag. However, at the same time, it has secondary effects. For example, 70% of all savings in China, of household savings, is in real estate. So when real estate prices go down like this, it reduces the wealth and it reduces the credit worthiness. And that has effects on spending and lending to those people. And that is having an effect which is detrimental to the economy. In my opinion, it was allowed to go too far, and so it's getting into the bones of the economy. The second, of course, is COVID, which compounds that. Chinese have a wonderful understanding of history. You know, they've had nearly 5,000 years of history recorded, civilized history. And so you could see that we follow things. They've had about 300 pandemics over that period of time. And so now with that pandemic, it causes the locking up and the concerns of that. And that's not something that still remains easily followed. You could see a worsening in that pandemic. So when you put the financial problem as an extension of real estate and the COVID problem, that's very depressing on their economy. In addition, they are having the external issues. They're having to change the economy, and also how it has an effect on trade. As the world economy slows and have more stagflation, they will be experienced a slowing and more stagflation. Exports will be weaker. And then classically, the great worry is droughts, floods, and pandemics of China. And they're experiencing drought. So a reader of Chinese history through dynasties is very aware that those sequence of events have sometimes been associated with the loss of the mandate of heaven. Well, in other words, enough disruption that it becomes disruptive politically and so on. So right now they have that. They have also a demographics problem because as the population gets older, it's right now they have nearly 300 million people who are old, of over 65 and so on. Their medical needs and their financial needs become important. They don't have a good pension system. And the needs are usually taken care of by a lot by children. But with the one-child policy, it's become very difficult for the children, the adult children, to take care of the parents, and that becomes a burden. So there are very important domestic problems that has to be dealt with. And so a world conflict, an international conflict that could occur on top of those things could be very disruptive to China as well as the rest of the world.
Thank you. I'm especially curious about your view on the fourth force, natural factors, because it has become more and more evident that the impact of climate change is getting worse every decade. Given that the agenda for climate change has been pushed further back in schedule due to the European energy crisis, it seems at times like we will cross the point of no return. Does the recent rise of ESG investing have any merit, and do you foresee for the global community, or what do you foresee for the global community in terms of climate change?
Well, I speak with experts on climate change, scientists, and I think we have passed the point. You know, there's always a point and there's always things that can be done. But we are, and over the next 20 years, will be experiencing the consequences of that which has taken place up until now. Many I could list them, but glaciers in that probably will change water levels, dissipate and change water levels and such things, and droughts and so on. And then in addition, there's very little time to change technologies that deal with this. And in the process, it's very costly financially because you either try to switch from more cost-effective technology that are polluting to less cost-effective ones that don't pollute. And so we're in a situation where it's costly to put a lot of that money in at a time where the world economy is also experiencing other costs. So it seems to me that we will be experiencing these changes, climate changes, and we will be experiencing the high costs of that economically, which will have the inflationary, and the inflationary will also have political implications.
Lots of problems.
And related to that, we aren't sure about pandemics. I would say what is clear is that China is not sure about the resolution of this. And there are others that change. So when I look at the first four of those factors, I think that there's reason for a lot of concern. The fifth factor is the bright factor.
Yeah, let's talk about perhaps the most hopeful force of the five, technology and human ingenuity. What industries do you find most promising in terms of innovation?
Well, we are innovating the capacity to think and to use the brain. And it's not just artificial intelligence, but it's much more than artificial intelligence. And that's the most powerful thing, because that innovation and thinking in inventing means that the pace of improvement accelerates. And so the ability to come up with solutions or new products, such as the ways that we dealt with the pandemic, alternative technologies and vaccinations and those types of things, meant that that pandemic, that one would have thought would have been terrible, taught us that we could work from home and we could have discussions like we're having here today, and we found cures and so on. So that there is, and it's happening in all dimensions. It's happening in healthcare, bio, in all dimensions. That great inventiveness is happening at the same time. So I see it pervasive. I see many industries being disrupted beneficially. But of course, like all new inventions, it's a two-edged sword. It changes things in ways where there are also greater cybersecurity risks. The ability of cyber warfare is the other side of that technology development. So that's how it looks to me.
Speaking of technology and innovation, I'm curious what your views of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, especially now that institutional interest in this investment have started to grow exponentially. You have previously revealed that investing a minuscule portion of one's portfolio in Bitcoin is reasonable. Do you maintain this view? Do crypto assets have a place in an investor's portfolio? Also, do you see any technological merit in these newfound currencies? Finally, are they the future, as some proponents claim?
You asked a bunch of questions in there, so I'll take them one by one. I think it's a remarkable accomplishment that a formula that was built about 11 or 12 years ago has operated in this way, and we've had the adoption of Bitcoin and so on. I break cryptocurrencies into the category of those that are an alternative form of money, like a digital gold, which is what Bitcoin is, versus there are many other kinds, stable coin and others, but I'm addressing the question particularly to Bitcoin now. And at the same time, I think that it has received an inordinate amount of support, and it has major risks. It will not provide privacy. It will, because governments can watch what it does. A currency is meant to be a medium of exchange and a storehold of wealth. And as a medium of exchange, it's not an effective medium of exchange. The price moves around and businesses could not use it and so on. So there's very little purchasing. You won't purchase your car probably with it. And as a storehold of wealth, it's very, very volatile, and it doesn't move in a manner that's consistent just with the value of money. So it has those problems of not privacy, moves around a lot, and not an effective medium of exchange. I think it's very interesting, and it's received a lot of attention that's out of proportion with its importance. For example, all of Bitcoin is worth less than a large stock, like Microsoft. It's worth less than the value of Microsoft. And there are so many things to invest in. I think that there has been a disproportionate mania almost, bubble to put so much money into that volatile asset that doesn't have, that has a lot of problems and uniqueness that make it something that is not, it's been more of a bubble than it has been a solid alternative currency. So I do believe digital currencies will develop a lot. They will be, but that won't be revolutionary. It'll be important transactions. But just as we can use a credit card now and we use digital currency and it makes it more efficient, that's not going to produce revolutionary change, and it's not going to be a storehold of wealth.
Thank you. I want to end with a slightly Korea-specific question on behalf of all our Korean audience members attending today. For a country like South Korea that is heavily reliant on the health service manufacturing sector, the reorganization of the world order and the global supply chain is bound to have drastic effects on our domestic economy. In light of this, what do you see for the future of South Korea? And do you believe we can become a key player in the global economy?
I believe that when I look at countries, I look at the basic fundamentals. The basic fundamentals are, do you earn more than you spend? Do you educate your population well? Do you behave civilly with each other to become productive over a period of time? That's very important economically. Korea does well in those categories, and those are the fundamentals. How do you raise your children to be productive, to work well together, to be learned so that they can be competitive in the world economy? As industries change, products will change, and there'll be that kind of an evolution. So I think that those are the very good fundamentals that Korea has in a world that is suffering for not having many. There are not many countries that have those capabilities. And so I would all of those things be optimistic. The issue, of course, is operating in the changing world order. And politically, in the area that you're in, that can become somewhat of a factor, which you would know better than I. So when I look at it, I look at, is the country earning more than they're spending, operating by good finances and good fundamentals? Is there intolerable or healthy internal conflict? You have order. There is good order. And is there a risk of participating in an international war? And that is a question that I think you can answer better than I can.
Yeah, I'm impressed with your broader meaning of the fundamentals. Okay, not just economic fundamentals, but rather broader institutional fundamentals. Now I'd like to ask a few questions that were submitted by some of our participants from the World Knowledge Forum. You can give us a very short, answers to these three questions. First, this is question about bond investments submitted by bexcoex@naver.com. Interest rates look likely to continue rising, at least in the near future. As such, bond prices are anticipated to continue to fall. Considering these factors, when do you believe bond investment will become viable, if at all?
I believe, I think the question of if ever is a very good one. It'll be closer to if ever, because we have a structural problem in that we have a lot of debt and are adding to the debt. And the only way that that can be dealt with, the best way of the bad ways, is to create a very low real interest rate and a very low nominal rate relative to nominal growth. So we have a situation in which there's going to be a transfer of wealth. There is a transfer of wealth going on. It's taking place subtly because when inflation rises faster to a level that is faster than the interest rate, and you have a bad real yield, that becomes a tax on those who have it, but it doesn't become really noticeable. If governments instead get their money by taxing, that causes a great uprising. But if the Federal Reserve or central bank prints money and money goes out, nobody thinks, where does the money come from? Who's paying for it? It comes from the depreciated value. And so I think that's going to be important. In this cycle, we're getting to bond yields. I think the question is approximately at what rate will the inflation rate settle? And then with it, where will the nominal rates be? I'm not precise, but I would say it looks like in the vicinity, if there were not further shocks, and there probably will be further shocks, that the inflation rate for the dollar, relevant to the dollar, which is what they're setting monetary policy on, it would be somewhere in the vicinity of 4.5%. With a 4.5%, and right now the break-even inflation rate is a little less than 3. I think that that'll go up to in the vicinity of 4.5%, and I think that there'll be a real rate that's positive on top of that. Not a lot, but there will be. So I think that probably the bond yield goes up in the vicinity of 4.5 or 5%, and that what that means is it has implications on other markets, because first, all markets are sensitive to interest rates. So the stock market, because all investments are a lump sum payment for a future cash flow. So it's the discount rate. The interest rate is the discount rate for calculating that present cash flow. And so, but when we have the bond yields go up, all other assets, the present value goes down. And so just a change in the interest rate of that magnitude would be bearish for stocks significantly. And that doesn't include the negative effect, which will come from the lower earnings as a result of that. So yes, I think that we're in a situation where we're in the beginning, or we're maybe halfway through the move. And that's what it would look like to me.
Okay, big transformation is underway right now. Okay.
Yeah.
A question from Mr. Hyungjong Kim. What are your prospects on gold prices?
Gold is used at times when there's a loss of faith of the alternative money, quite often in wars, because you can possess it. Gold is the only asset that one can have that doesn't require, only financial asset one can have, that doesn't require somebody giving you money. When you have stocks, it's somebody's liability. When you have debt, it's somebody's liability. They have to give you the money. Gold is that kind of asset. And I would say, and it comes particularly as a time of war because nobody knows whether they want to, who will pay in what. Everything else is debt. If you pay in dollars, the United States, you're getting a promise to get debt. So it depreciates. So I think that right now we are in a period where there's rising real rates and the tightening of that, and that's been weighing on gold. And I don't think that that is going to continue very long. I think that it's a situation that you will have to get to the point where the economic problems become greater. In other words, the tightening, the sequence is the tightening produces the bond problems, the credit, that higher interest rate then sequentially causes the equity in other markets to go down. And then when that goes down, then the economy goes down. And when the economy goes down, there will be more printing of money. And I think that that will be a time when there's also greater conflict in the world. I think if I was to take this cycle, I think 2024 will be a very bad year because the tightening that is taking place, we're partially the way through this cycle, but we're not through the cycle. And 2024 also sets itself for another political year. So I think that the next couple of years are going to be difficult, next year and two and a half, and then it becomes a political cycle. So I would say if I was looking longer term, that would be a situation where gold would be preferred. Right now, what's happening is there's a shortage of money. And that shortage of money, which is causing, there's a shortage of money and there's a lot of inflation. So you look at the US dollar, you look at the euro, you look at the Japanese yen, and you look at China's renminbi, and they all have problems. They're all printing money. They all need to print money to stimulate their economy. And simultaneously, there's a need for the tightening of money. So that dynamic of having stagflation, it will become more intensive, I think, over the next 18 months. And then you'll have the move with my expectations after that. Gold is the third largest reserve of central banks, but it's not been used as a money. And when there's a need for money, they go to the traditional monies led by particularly the dollar. Of course, the appreciation of the dollar in relation to other currencies is causing its own problems, such as in the emerging markets, because as they have debts and obligations to pay dollars, that creates a squeeze there. That's why we're seeing the dollar being relatively strong in relationship to the euro and the yen, but all of those countries' currencies being very weak in relationship to goods and services prices.
Wow, I mean, this year, the year 2022, we have witnessed one of the most unprecedented bear market in capital markets. You know, the equity market, you know, the correction and bond index, you know, recorded double-digit, you know, deficit, And now you are saying that 2024 will be really the difficult year. Wow, I mean, people about a month ago were talking about, Fed fever, and people are going to the, have a tendency to go back to the inertia, and the Fed would come in to rescue. But you are saying that we are, going deeper and deeper into this, difficult situations, and the year 2024, you are depicting that 2024 would be not only in terms of market, but also in terms of conflicts, would be a very difficult year, right?
Yes, and just to summarize it, there's a cycle, a tightening cycle. And the tightening cycle causes the economy and the markets to contract when interest rates get high enough. And those interest rates have to be high enough to be in line with inflation considerations. So when we look at inflation and we look at the whole cycle, it looks like we are about halfway through that cycle.
Okay, got it. Lastly, a question from Mr. Sang-won Lee. Which investor do you respect the most?
Well, I mean, there's, different investors do different things. There's great ways of investing money. So I would say I certainly have an enormous respect for Warren Buffett. I have an enormous respect for the Renaissance partners in terms of their very different types of investing. I have great respect for private equity investors such as Apollo, Silver Lake, they're at Sequoia, and venture capital. I have, those are some that come to mind. There's many ways of playing the game.
Usually, and Ray Dalio yourself is, regarded as one of the most respected investors. But the question was, who do you respect, right? Okay, thanks for the naming.
Those are people. We all have different philosophies. We all have different approaches.
Well, that marks the end of today's session, and I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today. And of course, a big thanks to you, Mr. Ray Dalio, for providing us with truly priceless insight and some clarity in these trying times. I want once again remind everyone that you can find a deeper breakdown of Mr. Dalio's insight in his latest masterpiece, Principles for Dealing with a Changing World Order. Truly a must-read for anyone interested in macro investing. Mr. Dalio, I hope you continue to inspire investors from all over the globe, including my son, and it would be my pleasure to meet you in person should you visit Korea. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thank you once again to the moderator, and thank you for sharing your knowledge, Mr. Dalio. This concludes the session. Next, how AI is helping elderly and single-person household. Global case studies, including Korea session, will begin at 1 p.m. Thank you.